Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Discriminating Gamer, the board game review show now with 100% more beard. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the main event. And when I mean main, I mean Twilight Imperium 4th edition from Fantasy Flight Games. Maine. You know, Maine, because the Space Lions, they've got the... Yeah, you know.
Ancient Greek mythology to Roman lore as well. There's a creature kind of creepy, but he's got some sex appeal. He stands at 9'7" and you never hear him talk. He's only got one eye, but he really likes to rock. They say he burned the village, that's so what if he did? Don't be so judgmental about the Cyclops kid. He's got a tiny temper and an itty-bitty fuse. If you're the one who lit it, then you're probably gonna lose. Mysterious and mighty with a really killer mind. Lives in a volcano making weapons for the gods. They say he ain't a baby, so what if he did? Don't be so judgmental about the Cyclops kid.
Twilight Imperium 4th edition from Fantasy Flight Games is the latest game in the Twilight Imperium saga. Now, of course, Fantasy Flight Games, I believe Twilight Imperium was their first game. It came out, I think, in the mid-90s. A few years later, they came out with 2nd edition. 2005, I think, was the 3rd edition. And then now they have, in 2017, the 4th edition. Now, this is, of course, a grand space opera narrative game. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit how it plays and then my thoughts. Now, the game board itself is a series of tiles that are made up. You can either use a mechanic in the book where you each go around and make them, as you did in the fourth or in the 3rd edition, or you also have in the 4th edition rulebook various pre-made tiles for various player counts that you can use that kind of give you some balance and kind of equal access to worlds and so forth. Now, the game is for 3 to 6 players, and there are 17 different races, I believe 17 different races, you can choose from, and they all have kind of different abilities and so on and so forth that go along with them. For instance, you have the Emirates of Hagan, who are really good at trade. You have the Barony of Letnev, which is kind of good militarily. You have the humans, which are just very expansionistic, and all of these different races kind of bring their own different, special abilities. You have also some race-specific technologies you can research and all sorts of fun and kooky things like that. Now, once you all have your races and the board set up, of course, you do get kind of your player aid, which it kind of tells you some of your starting information, but then it also kind of has these little sections on all your units, your military units, how much they cost, their movement, attack, all their stats are located right on there. You also are going to get your very own technology deck that you're going to research from, which is the same for everybody, but then, of course, as I say, each race does have some race-specific technologies as well. You've also got your command chart. It's kind of got a breakdown of the sections of the game on it, but it's also got your command areas. You've got a tactics area, a fleet allocation area, and your strategy area. And you've got your command tokens. Your command tokens they got your symbol on one side, a ship on the other. Under strategy and tactics, you put it with your symbol on the side up, and then under fleet, you do it with it's the starship on the side up. So they're going to let you do different things during the game, and it's very important. Now, you're also going to have your home worlds. You each start in kind of one corner of the board, and sometimes we'll start with one home world, sometimes we'll start with 2, sometimes 3. And you get cards for every world you control. Your cards have the stats of that world. Your stats are your resources, essentially the money it gives you to buy things and to do things, and then, of course, you have your influence. This is your political influence in the Grand Galactic Council that you're going to use to vote on various issues. Now, the very center of the board is Mechadol Rex. That's the capital of the dying empire you're all fighting over. And it starts with the Custodian token on top. Whoever is the first to claim it will get a victory point, and more on that later. But essentially, you've got that there. Now, you also have you lay out your track for scoring. That is a 10 in a regular game. It's the first one to 10 wins. You can play it to 14 if you want a longer game. Good luck with that. But what you do is you lay out a series on top of 5 Objective 1 cards and below 5 Objective 2 cards. Now, the first 2 Objective 1 cards you flip over so you can see them. Now, these are how you score points. They let you score victory points when you're able to fulfill those specific objectives, and that is the game. Again, the first one to 10 wins the game. You're not necessarily going to win through combat or through diplomacy or trade, a mixture of all of these things, but critically, if you can get these objectives. And there's a few other things that will pop up during the game. But you also get a secret objective that only you know, and you may have opportunities to draw more secret objective cards during the game, so if you can score your secret objective, boom, that's another victory point for you. So the very first thing you do on a round of the game is you draw a strategy card. Now there's 1 to 8. You have to select just randomly a first speaker. The first speaker, he gets a speaker token, and starting clockwise from him, you're each going to draw a strategy card. Now the strategy cards are numbered from 1 to 8. So in a 6-player game, you'll draw, each 6. There'll be 2 left over. The ones that are left over, you put another little trade good on there that you can get to kind of incentivize getting them later. But in a smaller game, like in a 4-player game, you're going to draw 2 of these cards each. So there's different things you can do there. But what's going to happen is each of the strategy cards have different things they can do. For instance, leadership, the first one, is going to give you more command tokens that you can use in the game, which are very important because these are kind of a currency in the game that you need to do things. You're going to have a 4 is, I think, construction. That one lets you build space docks and PDSs, kind of planetary defense shields and whatnot. And those are very important. You're also going to have, warfare, which lets you kind of move more, diplomacy, which lets you kind of call certain tiles off limits. You're going to have technology, so you can research technology and possibly 2 technologies if you want to pay for it. So you've got all these different things, but critically, it's not just what they let you do, because each of these strategy cards has a top primary ability, which is for you who plays it, and then it has a secondary ability for the next person, or pardon me, for everyone else that wants to play it. Getting clockwise, they can go and say, yeah, I want to do that secondary ability. They can pay the cost, and they can do that secondary thing. So those strategy cards are not just about you, they're really about everybody. Now, how actions work in this game is you're each going to take an action, then the next person goes, the next person goes, the next person goes, and then it comes back and around until everyone has passed. So you essentially keep taking actions until everyone has passed, and then the round is over. But how actions work is, first of all, you can take the strategic action. You can say, I'm taking the action on my strategy card, and then everyone else has the opportunity to do the secondary action on that card. Then you can take a component action. This is an action that's maybe granted to you on an action card. Sometimes these are special cards you have, or maybe there's a race-specific action you can take, or some other thing will let you take an action that's a component action. Or you can, of course, take kind of a tactical action. Now, how a tactical action works is you have to spend command token from your tactics area, and essentially you're going to activate systems. So you take that from there, you activate a system, you can move ships into that system, you can attack into a system, or you can put it on a home system with a space dock to build ships there. Once you've activated a system, you cannot move any ships out of that system for the rest of the turn, and you cannot move any ships into the system for the rest of the turn. Other people can, but you can't. So that's kind of what you're doing with those tactics commands. Now, when you do the strategy, usually it's free to do the primary strategy, but if you want to activate the secondary ability, it costs one of your strategy tokens. Not all of them, but most of them will cost one of your strategy tokens there. The fleet allocation section actually shows how many ships you can have in a hex at any time, in a system at any time. So if you've got four tokens in your fleet allocation, you can only have 4 ships. That doesn't include fighters, but you've got, of course, dreadnoughts, you've got your flagship, you've got destroyers, you've got cruisers, and they all have special abilities and special things. And of course, there's also the dreaded War Sun, which is kind of the Twilight Imperium version of the Death Star. Now, a lot of the objectives deal with taking Mechatol Rex. That's the system in the center of the board, which is the capital of the Dying Empire you're all fighting over. And whenever a ship gets there to drop off ground troops, because you do have to carry your ground troops, and carriers or some other things have a capacity you can carry with, when you get to Mechatol Rex, you can take it if you exhaust 6 influence. You exhaust 6 influence, you get it, you take the custodian token, and that becomes 1 victory point. You have scored a victory point from the game. And that's your victory point. No one can take it from you for the rest of the game. So ordinarily, you have your strategy phase, your action phase, and then you have a status phase. And the status phase is where you go, you look and see if anybody's scored the objectives, you kind of go through, do some house cleaning, you remove your tokens, you can get some more tokens, the command tokens. That's where you do your basic housekeeping. Now, on the turn after you take Mechatol Rex, however, you unlock a new phase. And this is the agenda phase. This is now the Galactic Council is back in session, and even as you're fighting this war against each other, you're still talking, you're still diplomats, and you're still trying to resolve certain issues. You have directives and laws, and these are things you're going to vote on. You're going to essentially draw 2 agenda cards during the agenda phase, one at a time. You're going to draw the first one, then vote on it, the second one, then vote on it. You can commit votes from your worlds, that's the influence you have. You can commit the votes to the different agendas. But here you can kind of trade. You can say, well, hey, I'll give you this if you give me certain trade goods, or I'll give you this if you give me promise not to attack me, or maybe you help me out attacking this other guy. This is where you can really negotiate. And some of these things are absolutely brutal. And these debates that happen in the game are as much fun as any of the combat or anything that else goes on. Now, combat in this game is, of course, very similar in a lot of ways to Axis and Allies. I mean, first of all, you have options. If you've got PDSs that have range, they can fire, and you resolve that. But then, of course, you kind of do a simultaneous combat where you're both rolling 10-sided die, and whoever, has ships remaining essentially is the winner. You can declare a retreat, but you still have to stick around for one round of combat before you can pull your ships back. But it's pretty big and it's pretty brutal, and you got to make sure you want to come in with enough firepower to do the job, but at the same time, if you come in with too many ships and then you're over fleet capacity at the end of the turn, you've got to eliminate those excess ships. So it's a very, very fun and thin balancing act that you do there with combat. Some ships, like the Dreadnought and the Flagship and the Warsun, I believe can also sustain damage, so they can essentially take one hit without being destroyed. You just turn it on its side, and then, of course, they repair at the end of during the next status phase. So you're going around and around like this. You're taking the strategy cards. You're taking all the various actions. You're using the strategy cards to kind of better your position. You're of course playing those secondary abilities on strategy cards. You are fighting. You're battling. You're trying to conquer these different worlds, dropping ground troops because you got to drop ground troops. That's the only way that you can take those planets. You get the planet cards to add to your kind of empire that you've got going. And then, of course, you're voting on those agendas. You keep doing this around and around and around until somebody hits 10 objective points, or all of the political cards have been revealed and one more cannot be drawn, in which case whoever has the most victory points is the winner of Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Why the beard? Well, I think it gives me a certain mystique, a certain dangerous quality that, it's kind of fun, kind of interesting, kind of, as I say, a little dangerous, and I think people really appreciate it. So, Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. As many of you know who've watched the show regularly, Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition has been my number one favorite game of all time for years. In fact, in the 3 previous years where I did my top 100 games of all time, and unfortunately I will not be doing a top 100 games this year, I just do not have the time with school. I've loved Twilight Imperium. It's just been, to me, what board gaming is about, the experience of what it's about, and I love it. I actually moved down here a few months ago to Texas, and when I came down, I brought Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition, all the expansions. I've thrown away all the boxes. I've got them all in a tub to carry everything. And then, about a week after I got here, they announced Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. Well, I was giddy. I was super excited. This is a big deal for old Cody. I mean, I love the 3rd edition. I was super excited to see what they did with the 4th edition. I've just played the one game of Twilight Imperium 4th edition now. But, I mean, I think one game's all you need to really get this game. And in fact, here, as I'll mention, having played the 3rd edition, I think you'll see my thoughts are valid here. The game itself is very, very, very similar to the 3rd edition. If you have played the 3rd edition, you will know how to play the 4th edition. It's just not that different. They are very similar games. Very similar games. Where they change, I'll talk about that for a few minutes. There are a few differences. Technology is very different. In the 3rd edition, of course, you have the big tech tree. Here, of course, you've just got this little system where you've got little colored symbols in the corners of the various tech. And if you want, say, this one, well, you need 2 prerequisites in red. So you already have to have 2 red technologies. And you got the big symbol in the other corner that says what they represent. So it's, okay, I need 2 red. I've got 2 red. I can build another red. So, I mean, technology is a lot easier. So you don't have to keep looking up the chart to see, passing the rulebook around to look up the chart to see what you want to get. It's a much, much easier system that way. So that's probably the biggest difference of the game. The agenda phase is different. Now, in the original, as I recall, I think it was one of the strategy cards. I can't remember which one. I want to say it was 3, but I can't remember. Maybe it was another one. It let you actually draw an agenda card. So you only actually did the agenda phase when you had that number of when somebody drew that strategy card. So you didn't have it every round, and then it was just you just vote on one issue, and that was that. Here, of course, the agenda phase is different. It triggers after somebody takes Mechatol Rex, and you get the 2. I like that quite a bit. I think that's quite an improvement. I think the technology was good here, and I think the agenda phase was very good here as well. Some of the race-specific technologies are a little different, too. Races are generally the same. Of course, some new artwork, some more little flavor there, but generally the same. I think... of course, they all come with a flagship, and the sculpts, too. The flagships are different. And a lot of the sculpts here generally are different. Some of them are radically different, like the cruisers are very different. Some of them look very much like the ones from the original, but they are better. They're just better-looking models than they were. The War Suns, of course, have a bottom now, which is something they didn't have. They looked like that Imperial German helmet before, and now they kind of have, a bottom. So that's nice. There's a few other little things here and there that are different, but essentially this is kind of the same game with some kind of streamlining and a little more pizzazz to it. Okay, so that's the differences between the 3rd edition and the 4th edition. So one of the criticisms of the 3rd edition is how long it took. Because Twilight Imperium 3 is a very long game, and does this one is it a shorter game? Is it more playable? Can you get to the table more? And, well, like I said, just played the one game so far, and we were at it about 6 hours. We kind of had to call it a little early because the store was closing. But it was, I had won. I was kind of out ahead by the end of that game. So that's kind of where it was headed. But the game was still long, is what I'm saying. Now, granted, we were playing with 6 players, and if you play with 6 players, it's going to be longer than with 4 players. And I think everybody I played with, of course, we were all new to Twilight Imperium 4. I think only 1 or 2 people had played TI3 before, other than me. So there was a bit of a learning curve there. So that may account for some of it. I do think once you get people who know what they're doing, this will play faster than a game of TI3, but not by much. I think the streamlining is good, but the big problem I don't think is necessarily the mechanics of the game so much as I think it is there is a huge capacity for AP in this game because there's so many things you can do and there's so many things you want to do and there's certain ways that you're limited, but you're trying to game it, trying to make it work for you, which doesn't always work. So that is something too that's very important. It's still a long game. I don't mind that. I love long games. It's just a matter of course, scheduling it and coordinating it with everybody and finding people who are willing to commit that time to it. But as far as actually playing it, it's fantastic. So, one thing, too, I did want to mention is first of all, this does have some optional rules. It has the promissory notes in it that you can use. It doesn't have the leaders. And one thing, I was never big on the leaders. I played the leaders once or twice. They were okay. But my big thing about the 3rd edition that I loved was, I think it was the Distant Suns is what it was called. That's where you have all of the different little tokens that you place on all the planets that are upside down. You don't know what they are, and when you get there, you flip them over, and you could have dangerous planets that attack you. They may have their own troops, or they may have a plague or radiation, or they may give you a ship, or they may give you tech, or there's all sorts of things that you could find. And so it kind of gave it a more 4X feeling when you could do it like that, and I really like that. And that's not in this one, so I was a little disappointed with that. Arguably, that makes the game a little longer, but still, I love, love, love that system of TI3. It's not here. I'm almost certain with an expansion, they'll probably come up with a way to add that sooner or later. I really hope they do, because I love that part of TI3. I've always played with TI3. I love that part of TI3. Because sometimes you don't get into combat until a little, like, in the mid-game, once you touch each other. And that was a way to kind of give combat earlier when you're trying to fight these kind of little local groups on these planets. I really like that quite a bit. So, I'll tell you this right now. TI4 is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. If you like grand, epic space adventures, Twilight Imperium, 3 or 4. There's just nothing better. I mean, it is the best space empire game out there. Perhaps, maybe, I would go so far as to say this is my favorite civilization building game. 4X civilization building game. I don't know if technically it's 4X, but this is the best. It's the best not only because I love the science fiction theme, and I love the rich universe of this science fiction setting here as well. But I just love the stories that it tells. I love the stories that this game tells. I've said this before 100 times. I love the stories that I love games that have these big epic stories. And Fantasy Flight is a master of this. I mean, look at Battlestar Galactica, look at Fury of Dracula, Eldritch Horror. I mean, you look, Fantasy Flight just probably does this better than any other company out there consistently with their games. And this one too. Star Wars Rebellion is another great example. This one does it my favorite. This is my favorite storytelling game for that reason. But even more than that, and again, I have said this 100 times, I love games that give you tough decisions. This is a game that is all about tough decisions. Do you spend you've only got 2 strategy tokens. Well, what do you want to spend those on this round? Or do you want to husband them and keep them? But do you want to get that tech? Do you want to build that PDS? Do you want to, get another, do you want to get more tokens by spending influence? What do you want to do with the game? And there's so much to do here, and it's so rich. And then there's the negotiation with people, your negotiation over the agendas, but then just generally, okay, hey, I want that planet. You don't attack me there. Okay, but then you don't go there. Oh, okay. And then 2 or 3 turns later, somebody breaks the deal, and they go after him. It was great. Like I said, this game we played the other day, I had a demarcation line with another guy. Sure enough, right toward the end of the game, he attacks me. I go back in with a war sun, I blow him away, and then somebody else brings a war sun into my home system and takes it over. I mean, it's just, I love this game. I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. I love TI3 and I love TI4. I love TI4. So, what's my recommendation? Well, my recommendation is this. The big question fundamentally is, if you have TI3, do you need TI4? And I would say not yet, because the games are so similar. There is some good stuff in TI4 that's a lot better than TI3. I don't know, given the price point, it's worth it yet, but I think it will be once we see the inevitable expansions that Fantasy Flight gives us. I think then, depending on what they come out with, then you'll want to go to TI4. And you may want to do that now anyway, that's up to you. But I just think the games, to me, feel really, really similar enough. And the changes they made, I don't know if they make it enough that you have to switch now. I'm sure eventually you probably will with the expansions, but right now I don't think you will. Having said that, if you have not played this game, or you're thinking about adding it to your collection, you're looking at maybe you see a discounted 3, or you see, the new 4, go for it. Go for it. And indeed, I'm going to tell you right now, buy this game. Buy it, buy it, buy it, buy it, buy it, buy it. For me, TI4 does replace TI3, just because it is a little more streamlined. It does bring some fun and interesting things to it, and I'm confident with some of these expansions we'll get Distant Suns or something like it. But I love this game. TI4 replaces TI3 for me. I don't know what I'm going to end up doing with my TI3 stuff. I may sell it. I probably will end up selling it, but I'll probably wait until after those expansions come out for TI4, just to be on the safe side. Anyway, I love this game. Love it, love it, love it. TI4 is an absolute winner from Fantasy Flight Games. Christian Peterson, thank you so much for giving us this new edition. He said before he saw the Space Lines documentary, Shut Up and Sit Down did, he talks about how this is not their best-selling game. They didn't know they were going to make a ton of money on it, but it was a labor of love, and it shows. This is a fantastic game. Buy it. I love TI4. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. We are The Discriminating Gamer. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, back when we were doing Season 1 of The Discriminating Gamer, and Justin and I were doing all of and Sean were doing all of the kind of short films, the comedy films around the board games, I had actually written a script for us to review TI3, and it was really fun, and I really wish we got a chance to shoot it, but just things didn't work out. We never did. Dang it. That would have been good.
Somebody help.